Most people miss this thing when it comes to sales and selling, and it's like night and day in terms of whether somebody's going to buy or whether you're not going to buy. And I call it the trigger point. So most of us understand our ideal buyer. It's a person, it's a business, it's a whatever. We've got a rough understanding of who we're looking for, but how, and maybe you don't, but how confident are you on when you are looking for them? When, the trigger point, because that makes a hell of a lot of difference. You can be talking to an ideal buyer who sounds interested, it's all wonderful, but if they're not in the market for whatever reason, and most people are not in the marketplace to buy most of the time, you're going for a real slither of the marketplace. Well, where do we find those people that are experiencing those triggers and motivations? And first of all, what are those triggers and those motivations? Could be simple things like births, marriages, deaths, starting a business, closing a business, launching a product, having a birthday, whatever. But what are those trigger points that your client experiences, or your potential client? And when and where and how can you find a group of people experiencing that trigger point? Because once you crack that nut, it makes selling a whole lot easier, because you go from selling to one-on-one individual people who may or may not be in the market for what you're doing to groups of people who are in the market for what you're doing. One of the prime examples for me is I do a lot of work with incubators, startup accelerators, and I do talks. I'm kind of wheeled in as an expert on those kind of things. So guess what? I'm in a room full of people who have a startup. Chances are they probably can't explain it very clearly. I'm there to help them with that in my hour session or however long I've got to talk. But ultimately afterwards, people approach me and they work with me from there. So I know that the trigger point for these people, or the place I can find them, is they're in an accelerator. They're in a startup incubator. If I can find them there in a group, it makes it easier for me to sell to them. The alternative is I find individual people on LinkedIn or on the internet and outreach them and say, hey, I had a look at your website. It's rubbish. I don't get what you do. But don't worry, I can help you, which is, labor intensive. It's not going to work. So just remember that knowing who your buyer is one thing, but knowing when they need you is going to make a real paradigm difference for you in terms of your sales activities. And if you don't know what the trigger point is for your clients, today is the day you need to think about that and work it out, because just making life harder for yourself without it.